Welcome into Daily Faceoff Live, your go-to source for everything hockey. Live every weekday at noon Eastern.
Welcome in Daily Faceoff, Tuesday, November 15th edition. Yaremchuk and McKenna, back-to-back days. Mike, I feel like Frank putting us back on the show 2 days in a row is kind of like a coach going to the same goalie in back-to-back games. He can't expect good quality from us.
Yeah, you can. Absolutely, you can. If anybody would have heard us off air before we came on and how much fun we were having talking about the good old days in Binghamton, New York, Tyler, this is going to be a great show. I'm feeling it. I hope you are too. We had some snow on the ground in St. Louis. Let's bring it today, brother. Let's go.
Let's do it. Let's throw 2 minutes and 30 seconds up on the clock and put a bow on Hall of Fame week in the hockey world. Yesterday, we had the official inductions. So now let's take a look ahead to maybe what the 2023 class could look like. Here's a peek at some interesting first-time eligible players. Names like Justin Williams, Mike Green, Jay Bouwmeester, Brent Seabrook, Henrik Lundqvist, and Corey Crawford. Mike, the one name here that stands out to me, Henrik Lundqvist. He has to be the lock first ballot out of this group. And I would go ahead and say, I think he's the only one out of this group that should get in next year.
I agree with you on that, Tyler. And here's the reasoning why. Henrik Lundqvist was one of the absolute most consistent goaltenders to ever play in the NHL. He went 13 seasons with his save percentage above a 910. 459 career wins during the regular season. Of course, run to the Stanley Cup Finals, career 918. When you talk about greats and longevity, and in one city, like Henrik Lundqvist stands out and above the rest here. I think for sure he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. The Kings going in. Tyler, do you see anybody else from this list, though, that you think maybe on a second or third could potentially be headed in? Because I see a lot of question marks on this one. Who else do you think may go next year?
See, and I look at this list, I agree, no other first ballots, like I said. I don't even know if any of these guys get in at all. I think Justin Williams has an interesting case, but the way I'll spin this back to you, Mike, is with this sort of group of first-time eligible players not being that strong, is this finally Alexander Mogilny's best chance to get in?
It better be. If not, the oversight involved in the Hall of Fame selection committee is off the charts. Alexander Mogilny, 990 games played. He's got over 1,000 points in the NHL, over a point a game. Led the league in tucks 1 year with goals, 473 total. He's got a Stanley Cup. And let's not forget that Mogilny he took a huge risk defecting from Russia to come play hockey in North America and continue this unbelievable career that he had. I don't understand why he's not in currently. He should be next year. And of course, we got a few other names to look at. I mean, I think Curtis Joseph has a good case next year. Yep. Maybe even a Rod Brindamore. If you go to the women's game, Shannon Szabados, or maybe a Botterill. There's a lot of goaltenders available as well as forwards. And especially as we play catch up to the women's game of people very deserving to get in, there'll be some interesting choices next year, I think.
Frank Saravalli has a tremendous piece up right now at dailyfaceoff.com. You can read about a bunch of players that are, potential options for next year's class. Mike, I'll say Mogilny, Lundqvist, Zetterberg. I'll agree with you. Cujo should get in. And I'll say two of Caroline Ouellette, Jen Botterill, and Shannon Szabados. I think two of the women's players should get in because, all three of those are giants. All three should get there eventually, but I want two next year.
I agree with you. No, I think that's totally appropriate. And, I think you can make a good case for, even for a Zetterberg. Like, it's always interesting to see, but man, it's got to be Lundqvist and Mogilny. Something's really wrong if it's not them for sure.
100%. I don't think you'll find very many people around the hockey world that disagree with that either, it's what makes the Mogilny thing so puzzling. But we'll push that to the side and we'll take a look at what we saw on the ice last night, which was another win by the New York Islanders. They're now 8-2 in their last 10 games. And perhaps the most surprising part about the run that this Islanders team has been on early in the year, Lane Lambert has them scoring goals. They're 10th in the NHL at 3.35 goals scored per game. Compared that to last year, they were 23rd at 2.79, over half a goal more per game so far early in this NHL season. I am stunned that Lane Lambert, a guy who was on that bench last year, has this team suddenly producing offense at an acceptable clip. I didn't see this coming, Mike.
I didn't either. I thought that the Isles would be hanging out towards the bottom. It's been impressive from Lane Lambert so far, and it's been by committee. They have 6 players with 5 or more goals. We're even talking Zach Parise in that mix. And this has been against good teams. Okay, the Islanders scored 6 goals against the Hurricanes. They scored 5 against Colorado. They've had several 4 or more games included in that grouping. But what's really causing this, Tyler, is that the Islanders are a veteran team that knows how to play in a third period. They're leading the NHL in goals scored in the final frame, 28 total in all their
Wow.
games played. So they've been coming from behind. They've been getting incredible goaltending from Ilya Sorokin and Semyon Varlamov. And right now, the Islanders are outpacing the advanced metrics. So there is a little bit of concern with their scoring, but the bottom line is that they're getting it done, Tyler. And I'll give you one more thing that I look at. Two of their last losses have been shutouts against Arizona and Detroit. It's something to keep an eye on, that when the Islanders go dry, they go real dry. But right now, Lambert's got this team trending towards the right direction, and they know they're going to get the goaltending to at least be competitive in every game.
Yeah, and I like that point you made there at the end, because while maybe the offense could be a little unsustainable, maybe they fall back towards the middle of the pack, I think everyone would agree that the goaltending is certainly sustainable. Both Varlamov and Sorokin can be those guys for the Islanders, and everyone likes to say, oh, it's early, let's see how it goes over 82, and I agree. I think the Islanders maybe fall back a little bit, but points in October and November are worth just as much as points in March and April. Like, banking these points now, especially for an Islanders team that was seemingly out of it because of their poor start last year, that's impressive too, the way they've come out of the gates and just said, hey, we're not going to let what happened last year happen again.
Definitely. It's all in the rear view. And another thing Lambert's done, he's gotten that D-core to be a little bit more active this year. I think Noah Dobson's been amazing. But you also look at Pulak and you look at Mayfield, their point totals are up. They've been more aggressive and been involved in the offense of that team. And that's something that had to happen this year. So it's definitely positive movement in Long Island.
Their former head coach Barry Trotz joined our friend Nick Alberga on Leafs Morning Take earlier this morning. We're going to drop the link for that one in the description on the YouTube video here if you want to go check that out. Let's move over to the Western Conference now, where last night the St. Louis Blues got a massive victory over the Colorado Avalanche. It's now 3 in a row for the St. Louis Blues, who are putting their struggles behind them in rather quick fashion. I was ready to write this team off. I was talking about, hey, where do they trade Ryan O'Reilly? What's Vladimir Tarasenko going to get them at the deadline? Do they move on from a bigger piece? Was I a little too premature in that, Mike? Do you think this Blues team has enough to keep this sort of success going and get back in the race?
This Blues team has life now, having 3 straight wins. The first one came at home against the San Jose Sharks on Military Appreciation Night, which was a big emotional lift for the club. And now they've gone on the road with the mom's trip, Tyler. So there's been a lot of ancillary juice for this club. So they beat the Vegas Golden Knights. Last night they knock off the Colorado Avalanche. But 2 key pieces here. Pavel Buchnevich is back in the lineup. Brandon Saad's back in the lineup. It's filled out those top couple lines. And you know me, man, I'm a huge believer in your fourth line. And I think Nola Chari has been awesome. He's been out in key moments for the St. Louis Blues. He's now fitting in within this team, and they're working harder. Okay, that young talent that was real complacent earlier, they've been bringing it every night. And you look at last night's game. The Blues managed to win that game despite being down 6-on-3 for the final minute. And I understand that the Avalanche were bombing shots wide left and right. McKinnon missed the net twice. Makar missed once. Like, they're tickling the scoreboard with the backswing. But the Blues were grinding, man. And this is a team in Colorado that was on a 4-game winning streak, and they'd outscored their opponents 20-8 during that span. Here comes St. Louis in. I mean, Falk takes a penalty with 2 minutes left. They're down 5-on-4. Then Buchnevich puts one out of the ballpark, 5-on-3. Well, let's not just kick it to 6-on-3 with the goalie pulled. And you had O'Reilly, Colton Parayko, and Mikko Mikkola out there for 1 minute and 30 seconds. Straight legging it. Binnington's toast, but he made 44 saves. So is this sustainable? I think there's life, and they're better. They're still dependent on their goaltending, a little bit too heavy, but they at least have a full lineup in St. Louis now.
And that's maybe the one area where I look back and go, that's where maybe we should have cut the Blues a little bit more slack. And yes, everyone goes through injuries, but Brandon Saad and Pavel Buchnevich, you name them, they're wildly important pieces to that team. And they're maybe not the young, flashy superstars or up-and-coming superstars like a Robert Thomas or a Jordan Kyrou, but those are big bodies who make life very difficult on the opposition. And I also think, Mike, they make life easier on the players on their lines as well. And that's maybe something I overlooked.
Absolutely true. You need to have a body out there that you can trust along the walls to win you battles, to give those young players a little bit more space. And like I said, when they came back in, it also let Braden Shen go back to where he needed to be in the lineup. It spaced out their top 3 lines and just diversified that impact up front.
Let's dig a little bit deeper, or should I say take a wider lens view on this Central Division, because if we do believe that the Blues are back in this thing, the standings and the race that could be developing in this division and really in the Western Conference as well could be fascinating. You think about last season in the NHL, there wasn't a lot in terms of playoff races. And now you look at the way this Central is shaking down, where Arizona and Chicago have been stealing points from everyone early in the season. We aren't writing off the Blues. We just established that. If you're writing off the Preds, that means you're writing off UC Saros. And I still believe he's more than capable of dragging that team back into this playoff race here. There is a chance that we have 6-7 teams all coming down the stretch in this division, gunning for 3 or 4 playoff spots. Mike, this could shape up to be one of the best playoff races we've seen in a decade in the NHL if all these teams start rolling.
Yeah, especially when you consider what some of the other divisions look like. I mean, the Pacific is very, very split. Even when you start to look over towards the Atlantic, it's starting to trend towards having 2 ends of the spectrum. The Central is going to be the one to keep an eye on. And really, which of these teams can separate or sustain and which are going to fall off? And to me, the key to that are really the 3 clubs that are towards the bottom are Chicago, Arizona, and Nashville. Where are they going to go? Is Nashville as bad as we think, like you pointed out? Is Chicago and Arizona as plucky and as good as they've shown? Those are the 2 I'm not really sure about. I think Nashville might hover towards the playoffs. I think St. Louis is going to get back in the race for sure. But Colorado's going to be there. I think there's no question Dallas will be, especially with Jake Ottinger back in the lineup and Pete DeBoer coaching. I've been fascinated by Winnipeg. And I think Minnesota, with their skill level, needs to be. Fleury's played great. So Tyler, I think this is the division to keep an eye on that will go down right to the last minute. And I think you may even have 2 to 3 teams vying for that wild card spot in the Western Conference.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. Like you mentioned the Pacific. I think everyone's kind of looking at Seattle in the same way they're looking at Chicago and Arizona and going like, okay, they're probably going to fall off a little bit. But Vegas looks legit. LA looks like they're going to push for a playoff spot once again. Then you have Edmonton and Calgary, who are kind of underperforming through 1 month of the NHL season. Well, one of those teams, if LA and Vegas hold on to 1 and 2, one of Edmonton or Calgary are going to be competing with Minnesota, Nashville, St. Louis, Dallas, Winnipeg, these teams for a potential wild card spot too. Like this Central Division being as strong as it is, but also the Pacific kind of keeping up the pace a little bit right now could mean that, one, the playoff race is fantastic, but then that also means the trade deadline could be wildly competitive, and we could have almost a little bit of an arms race here coming in the Western Conference.
Yeah, I agree, because everybody's going to be looking to pick up that 1 or 2 players to get them over the hump, and especially when these teams start to cannibalize points when you're headed down the stretch. You start playing in your division, and it gets that much harder to create any separation. The right acquisition at the trade deadline can be the piece that puts you over the top.
100%. There are a few teams, though, that are maybe not looking at the playoffs. They're looking more at the draft lottery and who's coming in the 2023 NHL Draft. Let's take a closer look at that with the next wave and Stephen Ellis. The next wave with Stephen Ellis, as always, delivered by our friends at DoorDash. Stephen, we're getting to the point where, there's a bit of a sample size now that we've seen from some prospects in the 2023 draft. And that means there's some guys who we're identifying as risers for this class. Who's one you have your eye on?
Well, first off, Tim Thomas for the Hall of Fame. Make it happen. I'm going to start
Goal
off
Union!
Yes, exactly. He was so dominant. There was some stuff better than guys like Kiprusoff, better than Lundqvist, better than Price, everything. Like he did so much in such a short span. He deserves some love. But one guy that's really kind of impressing me this year is Will Smith, the U.S. National Development Team prospect. Very easy to make some jokes. He was slapping the competition at the U18s this past weekend. He went and had 9 points in 4 games. This is a guy that I think I probably had around 15th to 20th at the start of the year, and now talking to some scouts that were kind of the same boat. We're talking about a guy who's maybe top 5 right now. He's just got some of the best hands in the draft. He's putting up a ton of points. He's very strong defensively. He's kind of got what you want from a two-way centerman. And, I can't say his game's a simple game because he is kind of a human highlight reel, but he makes it work. And you always got to wonder how that transitions to the next level. But at least when we saw the U18 Five Nations this past weekend in Plymouth, it was kind of like the first chance to see all these guys playing together in their draft year. And he was by far the best. So he's someone I'm definitely keeping an eye on.
We all want to see Big Willie style successful on the big stage. No question about it. A big bump for the NHL if that happens. We've been watching this draft now for several years and looking at Connor Bedard ever since his breakout even a 14 or 15-year-old saying this guy's the real deal, 100% first overall. But of course, you got to look down the draft. And Matvei Michkov is a very intriguing prospect. So what's the latest on him? Where do you think he may end up by the time the draft rolls around this spring?
There are some scouts that believe Matvei Michkov's the best prospect in this draft. And, looking at kind of what he was able to do internationally in the past, this guy is unbelievable. I think I've one time remember watching him attempt 3 lacrosse goals in one game. He scored 2 of them. This guy's just a human highlight reel, speaking of that. But it's an interesting situation there. He signed until, I believe it's 2026 to stay in the KHL. And, 2026. So that means he's going to be a while to get here. But then he also started the year injured. So he did miss, I think it was a month or 2 in the season. Came back. He's looking really good right now in the second tier of Russia, the VHL. He's played a few games in the KHL, didn't play a lot of ice time. This is a guy that I feel like we're really getting robbed of seeing internationally because of what's going on in Russia, because we'd see him at the World Juniors, the U18s, and all these events, and he'd be a superstar. He's got so much skill. He's one of the best Russian prospects we've seen in probably since like the Malkin Ovechkin era. He's going to be a difference maker in the NHL. But because he was injured to start the year, he had a slower start, and because obviously the Russian factor and the fact he's got a long-term contract in the KHL, I think teams are going to be a little worried. But if you could be patient in the draft, he's going to make your team so much better.
So there's the option of being patient with Matvei Michkov, but then there's sort of the third piece of what's maybe shaping up to be a 3-headed monster in this class, and that's Adam Fantilli. Could he maybe do enough this season to convince some teams that, you know what, we're not going to wait for Michkov. We're going to take Fantilli, who's maybe going to be in our lineup much, much quicker, 3-4 years quicker?
Absolutely. I think Fantilli is going to go second now because of kind of what he's been able to do in the college level. He's got nearly 2 points per game through 12 games. For the University of Michigan, he's the top scorer in the NCAA, which is extremely rare for a freshman. I don't know if I've seen a dominant freshman offensively like this since maybe Jack Eichel. And at this point, we could see Fantilli going out there and beating Eichel's 70-point season that he had. So that's quite impressive for a guy that, I got to see him playing in minor midget and everything. And when Shane Wright got exceptional status, there was a lot of talk about Adam Fantilli in the same year because of what he was able to do at the same level. I think that this is a guy that is going to be a superstar in the NHL. And he drives the play. He's so good offensively. He's become even better of a defensive player than we've seen in the past. One thing that really stood out to him when he was younger was that he was much bigger than everybody else. So that it was kind of like the Quinton Byfield thing where you can kind of just bully the other guys around and you can use that to your advantage. But now that he's playing older competition, he's still got that strength. He's still got that muscle, and he could be one of the hardest hitting guys out there, but he's got the offense to make you go, wow. So Adam Fantilli, it would be a number 1 prospect in many other drafts.
As always, the next wave delivered by our friends at DoorDash, where you can use that promo code GameDay25, get you 25% off and no delivery fees on your first order of $15 or more when you download the DoorDash app. Stephen Ellis, this is tremendous as always, and we'll chat again next week, man.
Absolutely. Tim Thomas, Hall of Fame.
Ah, yes. All those jerseys in his background. I'm surprised Stephen Ellis wasn't just rocking a Tim Thomas jersey for that entire hit. But anyways, we'll move on to our daily Faceoff inbox question. Hashtag AskDFO. The coaching change winds are blowing. Mike McKenna in Ottawa and Vancouver, or in Ottawa and Vancouver. They're maybe blowing harder than anywhere else. Let's put you in the shoes of a free agent head coach. If you could take over one of these 2 teams, which one would you pick?
I'd go for the Senators. And I think the reason being isn't just the talent in the locker room. It's just that, Pierre Dorion has been pretty strong in the media and backing up DJ Smith, where you look to Vancouver and Jim Rutherford has taken the team bus and run Bruce Boudreau over with it and then backed it up over him and then kind of went back again over him. And honestly, I'm not sure that that's where I'd want to coach. And so I'd look towards the Sens, and I guess I might still be kind of bitter because I still don't have my Canucks white jersey. It's the only NHL jersey missing from my collection. So who would you take, Tyler?
See, so at first I was like, I feel like the Canucks might be closer to competing. Thatcher Demko between the pipes, and you have some more established veterans. But then when I watch Canucks games, I see, kind of the body language thing with JT Miller, his effort in his own zone, the fact that Bo Horvat's not signed, maybe he ends up going out of there. And I kind of go, if I actually had to pick maybe I would go with Ottawa. You have all that young talent. You have the upside. They're a bit more of an exciting team as well. So I think I'd agree with you on this one. I think I would go with the Senators as well, but I would also agree probably the least likely of the two to have a coaching change. Like chatting with the guys over at Canucks Army, like it wouldn't be surprising if something with the Canucks happens in the next week or so here, Mike.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but I remember when Guy Boucher also got the vote of confidence in Ottawa, and he was gone about 2 weeks later. So it just shows that this sport's really fickle, man. But everything that's come out of Vancouver, boy, it sure seems like Boudreau's just a dead man walking right now as head coach of that club, unless it turns around like yesterday.
Yeah, like yesterday. That might be the best line. Let's move on to our daily bet segment, brought to you by our friends at Pointsbet Canada. 3 plays tonight on the NHL slate for me, and they are all player shot props because I love that our friends at PointsBet have these up. So let's dig into them right now, starting with Cole Caulfield. The line is set at 3.5. It is paying plus 130. That is unreal value. This guy's hit this number in 4 of 5 games. You're going to give me plus 130 on that? I'm betting it every single day of the week, so I love this spot for the Habs. The second one I have is John Carlson over 2.5 shots. A bit of a less payout here. Oh, sorry, we'll go Rasmus Dahlin. We'll go Rasmus Dahlin over 2.5 shots for this one. It's paying just nowhere close to what Caulfield is, minus 180. But Dahlin has hit this 8 times in a row. He's hit this in 12 of 14 games this year. This is a guy who should have his line set at 3.5, not 2.5. As long as the books are putting it out there at 2.5, I'm going to keep betting it. So even though the payout's not great, Dahlin is my second shot prop, and I'm sticking with a D-man for my third one and going with John Carlson over 2.5 shots. This one a little bit closer to even money at minus 110. He's hit this in 8 of 11 games so far this season. So I love going with John Carlson to hit his shot prop as well. So to recap, Caulfield over 3.5, Dahlin and Carlson over 2.5. And those are my 3 plays for the day, courtesy of our friends at PointsBet Canada. And with that, Mike, we wrap up the show as we always do with a little garbage time. What do you got?
Oh, man, this isn't garbage. This is great. Bobby Lou, lighting the lamp, Tyler. So Roberto Luongo, in classic goalie fashion, decides, I'm done being a goaltender, dons the forward skates, the player skates, grabs a stick, goes out, and just proceeds to put on a breakaway clinic. Look at the hands on Lou. Forehand,
Ooh.
backhand, forehand, under the bar, breakaway, forehand, backhand, airborne. Who knew? You know what this is? Like, a lot of goalies are pretty decent out skaters. Not like skaters. Like, some of us actually have decent hands and can shoot the puck, but we can't skate. So that was always our problem. This is just awesome to see, man. I love that he had the guts to go out and put himself on the stage like this. I like to play in alumni games as a forward myself, just because it's something different. We've put our time in as goalies. We've suffered enough abuse. It's time to go have some fun. And nobody better than Bobby Lou. Not even a visor on, Tyler. He's just straight bucket, face out there, didn't care. I love it.
Can we flash up the second highlight clip there again? Just that one, like the breakaway goal, impressive. The one where he walks through a couple of guys and then the patience in tight. But my favorite part of this clip, wait till the camera goes back in on him. Is that Bobby Lou hitting the gritty a little? Ooh, there we go.
Oh, look at that. This defensive coverage sucks. But other than the defensive coverage of that game, it's a typical beer league game. I mean, maybe a Hall of Fame one, but man, giving it the dance. That's why he's one of the best personalities to ever play. I can't tell you how excited I was to share a locker room with Luongo. Like, it was somebody I always looked up to, and even get the chance to dress a few games with him was an absolute highlight and thrill. The guy's everything that you would expect that you see on Twitter and his personality. Lou's the real deal, man.
Love it. Yes, thank you. Lou hits the gritty, Alex. Thank you for updating that on the fly. That's going to be a wrap for our show today. For Mike McKenna, Alex Allard, our head of production, and Brendan Bradley on graphics. Enjoy your Tuesday, hockey fans. Head over to dailyfaceoff.com. Interview with Barry Trotz on Leafs Nation. Full 2023 Hall of Fame class preview as well. All that's up. Everything you need, dailyfaceoff.com. And we'll be back tomorrow, noon Eastern. Talk to you then.
Thanks for tuning in to Daily Faceoff Live. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.